Homage to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Welcome back, young friends, to another session looking at how we can understand Buddha's gradual instructions on virtue, sīlakathaṁ. And today we're looking at a question that a lot of people ask, and it's around how can we live in the world easefully, living with ease or living with comfort. The Pali word is Pasuvihara. And pasu normally means easy, easily, comfort, comfortable, pleasant. So as the world gets more complicated, one of the questions we always ask is, how can we live comfortably with each other? Or even simply living at home with the people you live with. How do you live with ease? So Buddha has a number of teachings on this, and in this session we're only going to look at three particular suttas, three particular teachings from the Buddha to help us understand, give us a glimpse, give us something to contemplate together. So the first sutta we're going to look at, it's called the Pasuvihara Sutta, and this is in the Anguttara Nikaya. And the thing about living easefully with each other, it does come down to our agreements we have with each other, how we behave with each other, how we behave with our body, speech, and mind. So virtue plays a significant part of that, which we'll see. So this sutta, the Buddha says, bhikkhus, there are 5 means of dwelling at ease. What 5? Here, a bhikkhu maintains bodily acts of loving kindness towards his fellow monks, both openly and privately. 2, he maintains verbal acts of loving kindness towards his fellow monks, both openly and privately. 3, he maintains mental acts of loving kindness towards his fellow monks, both openly and privately. 4, he dwells both openly and privately, possessing in common with his fellow monks virtuous behavior that is unbroken, flawless, unblemished, unblotched, freeing, praised by the wise, ungrasped, leading to concentration. And 5, he dwells both openly and privately, possessing in common with his fellow monks the view that is noble and emancipating, which leads one who acts upon it to the complete destruction of suffering. Now you might say this is the Buddha's teaching to monks, but we can always grasp something or learn something from the Buddha's words, even though it's towards monks. So in this sutta, it's quite clear he's talking about how does the Sangha live together and how do they live with ease, with comfort. And so if you look at the first 4 of the 5, the first 4 relate to sila. So if you remember the Metta School meditation, in that meditation we looked at being upright and very upright, and we looked at cleaning many of the defilements or many of the things in order to be able to develop loving kindness towards all living beings. Skillful states, we called them. So right at the beginning of the Metta meditation, loving kindness meditation, we particularly looked at our physical conduct and our verbal conduct. And then we kept refining it until we got to the very end, where we ended up with 10 skilled states, which included not just the physical good actions and the verbal good actions, but we cleaned up for the mental actions as well. So the first 3 here, bodily acts of loving kindness, that refers to refraining from killing, taking what is not given, and also refraining from sexual misconduct. And then the second one here talks about verbal acts of loving kindness. So we talk about refraining from lying, like false speech. We refrain from harsh speech. We refrain from divisive speech, and we also refrain from frivolous or empty speech. So that's what we did. And then the third one here is mental acts of loving kindness. So in our minds, we have a mind that is generous. It renunciates. It gives up for others. And then the second one in terms of mental acts of loving kindness is we give up ill will. So we have non-ill will. and non-anger. And then the third one is we give up the covetousness, the longing, the wanting, and that's always associated with greed, so we give all that up. So Buddha says here that when you have these 10 skilled states, the dasakusala, then that makes it easy to live with people. So you think about the world, you think if all of us lived in this way, how wonderful that would be. There would be more trust with each other, there would be more kindness with each other, and there would be more generosity, and that's because there is virtue there. And so then the Buddha goes on for number 4 of living at ease. He talks about virtuous behavior that you have in common, that is unblemished, unbroken, and all those things that the Buddha says. So that means you have this moral agreement that you live together in this way because you have it in common. You agree to keep this kind of sīla. So of course the world, it's very difficult to imagine the world making these kinds of moral agreements. People have different ideas about how to behave. And that's why we have a lot of conflict. A lot of what people are imbued with is much more so greed, hatred, and delusion. And what the Buddha is expounding here in particular, you can see it's rooted in non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. So let's step back from the world for a bit and think about how we are in different communities. So let's think about at school. If we had these moral agreements with everybody at school, from teachers to support staff, administrators, to all the students, to all the different helpers that come to school, including all the parents that come and volunteer and are around school as well. If you had these kinds of moral agreements, it would be a very different kind of place. So imagine you go to school and maybe there's a teacher that sometimes has harsh speech. Imagine if the moral agreement is no harsh speech. Or among students, there's no divisive speech. Or you agree not to take what is not given. So you don't worry about locking up your belongings because you trust that you have these moral agreements and nobody steals from each other. So you can imagine if these things are there, then people live with ease without the fear of someone taking your things or harming you or speaking harshly to you and things of that nature. And same with intoxicants and false speech and that sort of thing. And sexual misconduct. You know, if everybody refrained from these things, you can live with ease. So if we take that even at home, so with your family, your parents, your siblings, so whether you have brothers and sisters, and maybe you have grandparents or you have someone even staying with your family. Maybe it's a helper. So again, when these moral agreements are there, that there are bodily acts of loving kindness, verbal acts of loving kindness, mental acts of loving kindness, and everyone agrees to live, for example, by the 5 precepts, then again, you wouldn't have to worry about someone taking your things. They would ask permission. You don't worry about someone coming to harm you or kill you, or speak in a particular way, lie to you. You don't worry about your parents, for example, having sexual misconduct and breaking up the family, or any kind of, behavior that is unhelpful, unwholesome. And same with intoxicants. You don't worry that when someone is intoxicated, they will be either funny behavior or unusual behavior or even violent behavior. So there's something in virtuous behavior that is really conducive, really helpful to enable us to live without fear, live without anger, live without all the things that make us not trust each other. And so that's what Buddha talks about, living at ease, living with comfort. And so the last one, of course, is much more specific to the path, which is the Buddha's teaching on understanding the ending of suffering. And so when we come to the Four Noble Truths, when we get to the end of this series, we'll talk about this a little more. But the path, when we talk about the path leading to the way out of suffering, is really about starting with right view. So this is the view that the Buddha is talking about here, that you share in common with the people you live with, we inhabit the world with. In this case, the Buddha is talking about the monks, that you have the view that is noble, that is emancipating, that it helps you to free yourself from the endless cycle of suffering. So that's what the Buddha is talking about. So when you think about these 5 things, you come to realize that there's something here that's very important. Now, in the world, it's very difficult for the people to get everyone to take up the 5 precepts. But even if they were to take up some form of moral agreements, not to kill each other, not to harm each other, that would be ever so helpful. One can't imagine what the world would be like if that was the case. The animals would live at ease. The insects, all humans would. There'd be no fear of war, there'd be no fear of any kind of harm. And it flows from there. Buddha has another teaching called the Sarania Sutta. And in this case, this is the second one, Dutiya Sarania Sutta. Sarania can be translated as something like agreeableness, amiability, cordiality. It means making it easy. You have the quality of making it easy to be around you. So it's very similar to the last sutta that we looked at, this Pasuvihara Sutta. But there's one difference, because in this sutta it talks about 6 principles of agreeableness, and it creates fondness and respect, and it leads to inclusiveness or inclusion, non-dispute, so you don't argue or get into disagreements, harmony and unity. So all those ones that we looked at in Pasuvihara Sutta, the Buddha talks about them for the same reason. It's because it leads to inclusion, which means there's no divisiveness. You don't get into arguments, you live harmoniously, and there's unity with the people that live together, because it's built on fondness and respect. And so the only difference in this sutta to the other one is that there's an additional quality or principle, and this is number 4, which is you share without reservation any righteous gains that have been righteously obtained, including even the contents of one's alms bowl, and uses such things in common with his virtuous fellow monks. So again, the Buddha is referring to monks. But in our case, we can look at it and learn from it, because this is really around generosity. So you share what you have without reservation, without thinking, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure I'm going to share that. Instead, you don't have reservations. You freely give, you freely share. So anything that you gain righteously, so whether someone gives you a present, or you earn it, or you go out and buy it, or you win something, so it's something that is being righteously gained. And then the Buddha says, in this case, his example is you share the contents of your alms bowl. So in our case, we share whatever belongs to us, whatever is on our plate in our case, in terms of whatever someone has given us as in food, and we share it. So if someone is hungry, we share that. And then we have this in common again with people that we live with. So imagine if there was this particular quality in the world, then how many people would go hungry? You can't imagine anybody would go hungry, because if everybody had food in their bowl or their plate, they would share if someone else was hungry. So if you saw someone who was homeless and they were hungry, you would simply give. You would say, well, I'll take this portion, you take this portion. You see an animal on the street who is hungry, stray animal, or in the forest, you would leave food out to make sure that they don't go hungry, that it's easy for them. You don't run them off when they come to your garden and look for things from your fruit trees, like if they're birds or something, or squirrels. If you see, a mother feeding her child like a baby animal, then you would, share what you have. So that's the thing. These qualities, if they are principles by how we live in the world would be a transformed place. Same with at home or at school. Like no one would go hungry, no one would feel at a loss. And it's quite a wonderful thing when you think about it. Now, it is a bit of an ideal to think that the world could transform in this manner, but it's a wonderful thing to know that if you ever become someone who has power to decide things for, your community, your family, if you go into politics, for example, these principles are wonderful in terms of how we live with ease. So say, for example, if you're a politician, you would think about making sure that whatever the farmers grow, they're paid properly, and whatever is extra, they are shared out. So sometimes, there's excess on the market and it goes to waste because farmers throw it away thinking it costs more to transport it. But if you're a politician, you would think, okay, I'll make sure that the farmer doesn't lose out. Or if you're a company, you would pay, some agreeable amount, or even take it off their hands if they're willing to give it freely and pay for all the transportation and share it with communities in need. So no one in the country ever goes hungry. Same with not just food, but clothing and other basic needs, from heating to all kinds of things. So you can see how when you live with these principles, one can live in harmony, in unity, with respect, and you don't fight over things. You don't fight over basic things. So it's something to think about for sure. But definitely where we can make this happen is in our own homes, with the people at school, with the people at university, with people that we work with, in our small communities. You start where you are and then you let it flow. We become really good examples when we start to live like this. People start to feel really empowered because these are our personal choices. When we take up virtue, these are really our choices. We get to decide how we choose to behave. And so when we behave in a very wholesome way, this is another thing about sīlakathaṁ, Buddha's instructions on virtue. We make it easier for people to live with us. And we become really good role models for others to base themselves to follow. And when we are in leadership positions, or even at school, if we're prefects, we have a role to play, then we become good examples for other people to follow. It's good to know. And the final sutta we're going to look at is this Pathama Samvasa Sutta. And again, it's in the Anguttara Nikaya. And this is about living together. And Buddha gave this teaching, and he was sitting at the foot of a tree. He was traveling and he came upon some lay householders, and they were traveling as well. And so they stopped along the road and they actually sat with the Buddha, and the Buddha gave them a teaching about household life and 4 ways of living together. And the 4 ways are essentially a wretch lives together with a wretch. So in this case, the Pali word is this word called chava, and it means corpse. But I guess you could also translate that as wretch, or sometimes I've seen the translation as zombie. So zombie lives with a zombie. But essentially it's corpse because I guess the explanation for it could be that when you don't have good virtue, so it's like you're deadened like a corpse because you have such poor sīla. So that's the reference there to a wretch. So the first one is a wretch lives together with a wretch. If you like zombie, you could use zombie lives with a zombie. A wretch lives together with a female deva. And then the third is a deva lives together with a wretch. And then the last one is a deva lives together with a female deva. So in this case, what the Buddha is saying is it really comes down to a wretch being someone who doesn't keep the 5 precepts. That person is immoral, of bad character. They dwell at home with a heart obsessed with the stain of miserliness. So that means they're very stingy. They insult and revile good people, so ascetics and Brahmins. And so that kind of person lives with the same kind of person with those bad qualities. That's a wretch living together with a wretch. The second one is a wretch lives together with a female deva. So again, a person with all those bad qualities but lives with the opposite, someone with the good qualities, someone who takes the 5 precepts and develops it. That person doesn't insult or revile other good beings, and also is of moral behavior, has a good character, and dwells at home with generosity. So that's what a female deva is like. And so when you look at number 3, then, a deva, someone with good qualities, they live with a wretch. And they live with someone with bad qualities. And then the final one, of course, is they both have good qualities. So the thing about what the Buddha is saying here, so I'll read out what the sutta says at the end. These are the 4 ways of living together. When both are immoral, miserly, and abusive, husband and wife live together as wretches. The husband is immoral, miserly, and abusive, but his wife is virtuous, charitable, generous. She is a female deva living with a wretched husband. And then the third one is the husband is virtuous, charitable, generous, but his wife is immoral, miserly, and abusive. She is a wretch living with a deva husband. And then the fourth one is both husband and wife are endowed with conviction, charitable, and self-controlled, living their lives righteously, addressing each other with pleasant words. Then many benefits accrue to them, and they dwell with ease. Their enemies are saddened when both are same in virtue. Having practiced the Dhamma here, the same in virtuous behavior and observances, delighting after death in a deva world, they rejoice enjoying sensual pleasures. So what's really interesting about this sutta is again Buddha's using a different way of teaching us about virtue. That if we live together with the same kind of virtue, the living becomes more at ease, more comfortable. There are all those things we spoke about. You can live in trust, in unity, you have mutual respect, you don't argue. But when you have these different permutations, that someone doesn't have those good qualities, who doesn't keep the precepts, then it becomes difficult. You see people arguing all the time. And so Buddha's likening it to living with someone who is a wretch or a zombie, and it becomes quite unpleasant. So there is no unity, there is no respect coming from the other person or to each other if you both have those qualities. There's no generosity, from which is the foundation, the platform for you to live comfortably with each other. And you keep insulting each other. So the speech really goes down, the bodily action goes down, there'll be a lot of finger pointing, a lot of waving of hands, and worse than that if things escalate. So the one that the Buddha holds up is the last one, where you have the same virtue, you look after each other, you treat each other with mutual respect through body, speech and mind, you don't have any misconduct, you don't lie to each other, there's honesty, and you don't take anything that's going to make it difficult to maintain your virtue. So you don't take intoxicants and take that risk. And of course, when you look at it that way, you realize there are lay people in the Buddha's times who live by this kind of example. So the one that comes to mind is Nakula Mata, Nakula Pitta. So Nakula's parents, they were asking the Buddha questions about this as well. How do we be reborn together again? And Buddha gave a very similar teaching about having very similar virtue or the same virtue and practicing the Dhamma in the same way and having the same intent, of course. And so after death, they would have been able to be reborn in the Deva realm, because they would live the life at ease together. So again, you see, Buddha gives very similar teaching in many respects to lay people as to monks, although with monks it's slightly more specific. But because we have learned the loving kindness, that we know about Dasa Kusala, the 10 wholesome conduct, we know that when we do our metta school meditation, that helps as well. So that's why those suttas are also very important. But it's nice to see Buddha be really explicit and talk about what it's like to live with each other. When we have differences in our sīla, then that's where a lot of the arguments come from, a lot of the disagreements, a lot of the difficulty where we get angry with each other and there's less harmony. And so when you take this teaching on board, if you are in relationships and you're going to be married one day or that sort of thing, then you take this on board. It's very helpful. And if you practice together and uphold the same kind of moral agreements, then you'll have less issues and less challenges. They'll just be the external challenges that you take on together. So that's a few things to think about. It gives a different flavor of how we can look at virtue, how it can be very helpful in a practical sense. And the same thing can also apply with our friendships, that you can take the same teaching and think about our friendships. Because with our friendships, we also are concerned about friends harming us, friends taking what is not given, friends having misconduct, friends who lie to us or have all kinds of different speech, talk behind our back, talk in a different way when they're intoxicated. So when you agree to have moral agreements or you only associate with people that you can trust, there is a reason for that. And then you don't worry so much and fear people talking behind your back or having harsh words and things of that nature. So always remember, when it comes to virtue, when you refrain from certain things, that is also offering protection to other people. And in turn, it comes back towards you, because the fruit of that is, if you offer protection to others, non-harm, non-ill will, then of course in future you can expect the good result of that. So we can end the session here. Let's share the merit with all sentient beings. May all beings be happy and well. May all beings be free from suffering. Blessings of the Triple Gem. Wishing you all well. Teruan Saranai.